Welcome to this week's special episode on Wednesday, and we're meeting with Jimmy Price. We're going to talk about the intersection of Kratom and Kava. And before Jimmy introduces himself, because many of you have probably heard him in your ears on many episodes, so he actually does need an introduction. Before he introduces himself, I'm going to give him the opportunity to apologize to me because I've gotten a lot of feedback with his golden vocals and his dulcet tones. I've gotten comments that he sounds like he's a NPR reporter or he could be a doctor. And then they compare him to me. I get some complaints. So this is your opportunity to apologize for sounding so good. I'm just kidding. Jimmy, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself? You've done some Kratom in the headlines. You've done some other segments on some science. So go ahead.
Certainly. My name is Jimmy Price. I have been sitting here watching this craziness unfold for the past 20 years, from the beginning where the first Kava bar picked up Kratom as a viable commercial item. And I've been watching it just evolve into a nightmare that it is today. And Charlie, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cause you any grief with my little segments. There's a whole list of authors that are doing research on Kratom that are coming up with quite different conclusions than what we've seen from some of these more published, or more, I guess you should say, celebrated Kratom researchers. It's an honor to be on here. I know I've been anonymous for quite a while, and it was on my request. I didn't really know where I would fit into this picture. I'm deeply into Kava. I have been for the past 20 years. I'm very much connected to all of the world's leading researchers in regards to Kava information. It is something that I did not think that I would ever have to be a part of. When I started my adventure with Kava, I saw this little thing about Kratom on the horizon, and I was like, you know what? If I stick to Kava, I'll never have to worry about this Kratom thing. But lo and behold, I've had to educate myself from the very bottom up. I've had to understand what this is. We'll go through that later, but part of my story it does play a role in part of my story. But I'm from Nashville. I've been born and raised here, and I work for a family business, which allows me the time and the focus sometimes to read these research papers, ask questions directly to the authors, and get clarification on these things that I don't understand, so I can take the information and give this to people in a way that they can understand. And you could do that with ChatGPT, but it's different when you have someone that's read not only that paper, but every other paper regarding the same subject. It makes a big difference. But I'll turn it back over to you for a moment.
And I'm just kidding. It just people give you compliments for the sound of your voice. But when you talk about Dream Team, I know you're talking about there's a certain set of Kratom scientists that are very aligned. They're independent, but the industry cites them over and over again. And so I'd say they're industry favorites.
Yes.
But what you're getting at is there's this, I think we can both agree that the science on Kratom is not uniform, and there isn't a consensus. If you look outside these core scientists that the industry favors, and
Right.
you get a lot of mixed singles, it's not as I've said in other podcasts, it's not as rosy. And I want to play a little clip from a Kratom person in recovery who tried Kava and they had a bad experience. Let's listen to that.
So into the picture comes Kava. And this is just over the last couple months. Like I mentioned, I've been under some extremely high stress. And part of what has happened with that is that very similar to what actually, I guess it is a bit different. What honestly led me to start using the Kratom was the seeking another out. But part of that was another release when I was feeling stressed, looking for something else I could do when I was stressed. I've clearly never learned very healthy coping mechanisms for my stress. Obviously, something I could stand to do a bit more work on. But so I'm in this really high pressure new job. And the pressure of it has been really getting to me. And so I've been getting into this panic attacks area again and this real huge sense of overwhelm. And so at the head shop that I started buying my Kratom at, they also sell what is called micronized kava. And what that means is that it's finely ground. And so I started buying kava in bulk from them and mixing it with water and drinking the kava. And this only lasted for a couple weeks. Now, kava, like I mentioned, is another plant type, and kava's effects are known to be calming. So kava, when taken in large enough doses, can sometimes mimic benzodiazepine type responses, like a Xanax, right? And that's exactly what I was looking for. I wanted something that could take the edge off some anxiety, that could hopefully help me continue to function and do this job while I was not at all facing the actual stress and overwhelm that was causing the issues to begin with, which I have since obviously started to take steps to address. But I was trying to put this Band-Aid on this issue again with using this kava. And my experience with kava, I don't know for sure if it was actually exacerbating my anxiety, but I believe that was the case. I do believe that kava was, as the kava was getting out of my system, I was getting that baseline anxiety to be up higher than it was before the kava use, similar to what happens when we drink at our anxiety. You're feeling anxious, and so you take a drink of alcohol to bring that anxiety down, and it temporarily brings it down. But when that alcohol gets out of your system, your anxiety level is actually higher than where it was before you ever drank in the first place. And so it becomes this self-fueling cycle. And I think the exact same thing happened with the kava. I ended up getting some medication to help assist with getting off that and assist with getting my anxiety under control temporarily. So I was finally able to get off of both of those substances again. I did backslide onto the Kratom temporarily in that week or so period as well, that I was really using a lot of the kava just because I was in such a desperate state to try to escape those awful feelings. Totally forgot about the fact that Kratom had been causing panic attacks, and I started trying to throw Kratom at my panic again, like that was going to help anything. This is just, I'm putting all of this out here to educate first and foremost. I think that people in the addiction community should be aware of the possibility with these two substances for them to be abused. And for those of us who suffer with addiction, who do decide to try to utilize them for the things that they are promoted for, I would urge extreme caution in doing so. And just please know there is a high possibility of dependence, particularly where Kratom is concerned. Kava is a little more interesting. Kava can actually be bought in small quantities at Walmart. There is a stress relief tea that includes kava. I think kava, when used appropriately, is likely a very beneficial plant. Unfortunately, my experience with it was that I was just obviously, clearly abusing it. And it's very dangerous to do anything, to abuse anything like that to excess.
What is your advice that you give people? They're saying, I'm going to try Kava, and they're like 2 days off of Kratom. What do you say to people like that?
No, it's more important. It is far more important to feel the suck, to embrace it, to understand yourself and move forward and see how far you've come, than it is to add something that might cover up a problem that you have. Now, Kava is an intoxicant. Kava is something that people use recreationally. Just don't. If you're the number one thing, if you're in recovery, get your head right, man. Don't add on anything else. Nothing else. I don't care if it's any of these supplements that claim to change the way you feel. Don't. Get it. Your number one thing walking through your life. Guess who you have to listen to the most? You. The one that you have to listen to, and the one that makes the most noise, is the one between your own two ears. And that's where we have to focus. Don't worry about Kava.
I know you have a Kratom quitting story yourself. You could qualify to be one of us and could tell your story on a Sunday. So why don't we hear that?
Certainly. Now, and I always try to, because running these, I'm also, I guess I should just walk back just a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm also a moderator for our Kava on Reddit, and I get all the questions about Kratom, but they accuse me of being some flatline nerd that just doesn't have a clue and just doesn't want people to do what I just want to control people. But the truth is, I'm a recovering addict. I use fentanyl, perfluorofentanyl, acetylfentanyl. And I know this is going to sound crazy, but and I always seem to go for crazy stuff, but in nose spray bottles. I would buy nose spray bottles off the internet of these chemicals. And how I did not die, I have no idea. But I used to wean myself off of it, I used Kratom. And it worked like a charm. And this was before you could go down to the store and buy it. It wasn't at the head shop at this point. It was still online only. You couldn't go down and just purchase it anywhere. So I ordered a bunch on the internet and I would cap it up. And I would do this. I would take 10 caps a time, 3 times a day. And this was about 30 grams per day. And I did this and it actually helped. Now, did it make them go away completely? No, but it did help. Ended up getting pretty dependent on the Kratom itself. But then I was continuing to do that. I would hide in the kitchen before my wife got home. I would get home and just get all the powder out and rush and try to make these pills before my wife got home. And there'd be like green powder everywhere. I had to clean up all that stuff. And it would all be just like this frantic, like attempt to make sure that I didn't get caught doing this green powder. And it's just so dumb looking back at it. But I would do that every day when I got home to make sure that I had 30 pills for the next day. And I never tapered down because I was scared to. I found that I was fine where I was at and I didn't want to go any lower. I'm one of those addicts where I believe that, hey, I can stop whenever I want. I just don't want to. And I never do. I never want to stop. And that's the problem. Yes, Kratom can be great for those people getting off of things, wanting to get clean altogether, and they have some sort of supervision. But if you're doing it yourself and like you have that gene like I do where there is no off button, like you are more likely to just be hooked on the Kratom from then on. Yes, it's going to be far less likely to kill you, but you've still sold your soul to a substance for money in a capitalist society where people want more and more of it, or they'll make you whatever strength product you want as long as you're willing to pay. That's the problem. And I think that's where everything goes awry, is where we've lost that holistic sort of, I want to say holistic, but the altruistic viewpoint where we're trying to help the addict. And I get that. Like, I get that. I am that. It helped me. But at the same time, where do we draw the line in the sand and say, this is a product for opioid cessation, not coffee? We're not going to sell this as coffee. We're not going to sell this as gummies on the internet for energy. Like what, where is, obviously the line should have been drawn and it has been long crossed. Yeah. My problem with that is that we are now allowing this product onto the market without any sort of regulation in terms of what it can possibly do. It has been here for 8 years. We have been messing with this for 8 years. Before that, it was very unknown. 8 years ago is when this took off. We have now reached the point where those people who believed the lies 8 years ago are coming to realize they were lies. And they're coming back trying to get clean, realizing they can't. They're trying to undo the damage that was done in their life from the seeking and finding and getting and making sure they had more, and that sort of process that causes its damage in its own right, above and beyond that of the substance. I'll let you continue.
When the attempt to ban, when the DEA and the FDA, and then that attempt to schedule it got beat back. Yes. That was definitely a mark in time. There was a before that and then after that. And we're definitely in that period of 8 years after that. I want to just rewind a little bit. How long ago were you?
I did Kratom back when I was stopping fentanyl back in 2014, 2015. And what happened after that is I found, another weird thing. I found a bottle of e-liquid fentanyl that I did not realize was still in my cabinet. And it was off to the races after that. And it was like I put the Kratom down, went for the fentanyl, and then I got caught. So yeah, I am an addict, like through and through, an addict. And Kratom is no more than just it's opioid light. Let me dispel something. Kratom does not tickle your opioid receptors. There is no tickling of any opioid receptor. You have partial agonist. A partial agonist means it is only effective to about half what you would normally see in morphine. That's all that means. Now, it doesn't mean that it's less addictive. It just means that it might take longer to become physically addictive. So it does not matter if you're a partial agonist when you have no tolerance, when you're throwing this stuff at people in the general public. It doesn't matter if they have no tolerance. A partial agonist means jack. Sorry, I just wanted to clear that one little bit of falsehood up that I hear spread all over the internet ad infinitum, that it just only tickles your receptors. That is a very simplistic way of describing something that has far more implications than just a tickle.
Did you use Kratom for a couple of years and then you're one of the type that relapsed back onto fentanyl and then you just quit everything?
Yeah, I used to Kratom for about a year, but yeah, I went right back to fentanyl once I found it, because that kind of doesn't speak negatively about the Kratom, because in that situation, I feel like that was more me. Like, I found that, and when I found it, I was like, oh, I know what that is. Like, it was I know what this is. I'm going to do it. So I'm not sure I can lay that negatively on Kratom. I did have pretty decent withdrawals from it. It gave me the bad RLS. I had the insomnia. I had the daytime anxiety. Whatever the withdrawals were from my 10 months of Kratom consumption at 30 grams per day. And I thought that was normal. So I was like 30 pills a day and I feel better. And sometimes I would have to lay down on the couch at work because I couldn't stand up and my eyes were wobbling. And I don't want to paint the picture that I'm against the plant, because that's ignorant to be against a plant. The plant just grows. The plant is just a genetic being on this planet that does all that we do and try to survive. I don't worry about the plant. I don't worry about the consumers so much. Where my target and where my focus is mainly is in the way that these products are marketed. They are marketed in such an irresponsible way. I'm inundated by these Facebook ads that are like, gummies, and these are strawberry flavor, fruit flavor, this and that. Get your energy here. Throw caffeine out of your life. Be sober curious. All this stuff. It bothers me, and and when I speak, and I want whoever's listening to this to know that I'm not speaking about the consumer. Like, the consumer is the person that has been long forgotten in this entire deal. Like, about 10 years ago, the consumer has been forgotten. Once it got into that like solid gray area after the FDA couldn't schedule, is when people really started pumping money into this. It is an interesting thing to have sat and watched from one place selling Kratom to 400 establishments across the United States, and most of them in South Florida or Florida in general.
How does Kratom affect the brain?
Kratom affects the brain. There are several ways that Kratom affects the brain. You have opioid like properties, you have adrenergic or stimulant like properties, and you have 5-HT, which is serotonergic or SSRI like properties. And it's a pharmacy and a plant. A lot of people want to say it's an opioid. Yes, an opioid, but it's also a stimulant, and it's also an SSRI of sorts. How does it work in the brain specifically? Mitragynine is a partial agonist with a low affinity for mu-opioid receptors, where the metabolite of mitragynine, which is converted through oxidative metabolization in our own bodies into 7-hydroxymitragynine, which is commonly known as 7-OH. That is what gives Kratom its addictive properties and its opioid properties. It's when we process mitragynine, we take about somewhere between 12 and 20% is hydroxylated, which means a hydroxy group is added to it. And this makes 7-hydroxymitragynine, which is a much stronger agonist, a full agonist at mu opioid receptors, which are the receptors that give you pain relief and pleasure. And some guinea pig ileum tests, which is a very common tests to ascertain opioid reactivity and how well it works, showed that 7-hydroxymitragynine had a efficacy of about 16 times that of morphine with the same amount of activation at the receptor. So we're talking something that is highly potent that comes out of all kratom products. And we also have specific alkaloids like speciosiliatine is also one that has a little bit of research that can back up its opioid properties. And when I say opioid, I want to make sure that we define something. There's been misinformation that's been shared left and right saying that kratom is not an opioid. So kratom alkaloids are opioids. They are natural, atypically structured opioids, and that is what they are. We have so many arguments over that, but and continuing to how it works in the brain, it causes the release of dopamine, serotonin. It causes the mu opioid receptors to activate. One thing that people do like to talk about a lot is that kratom alkaloids have less properties at B arrestin, and this is true, and it may make a bit safer the kratom alkaloids. However, there's emerging evidence showing that beta arrestin is actually not all that involved in respiratory depression with opioids. So that sort of hinged argument there is very loose. It's a very loose hinge, but still we have accounts of deaths and things from
And
kratom
compared
products.
to in contrast, how does kava interact with the human brain?
Sure. I'll tell you the number one misunderstanding with kava is that it's a GABAergic substance. Kava is not a GABAergic substance, and you can email me and I'll go back and forth with you and I will explain why it is not. But Kava is a pharmacy plant. And that's why this is such a convoluted thing to try to untwine the two. Kava can act as a sodium channel blocker, a calcium channel blocker, pretty much it has a stronger topical anesthetic property than cocaine. They tried using it for dental surgeries and things to test to see how well of a efficacy it had to be a topical anesthetic, and it numbed for days. So it was actually too strong for the properties, and the only thing rivaling it actually is stronger than cocaine for its topical anesthetic properties, specifically kavain, which is the most abundant kavalactone in kava. But how it affects your brain, it causes the release of norepinephrine shortly, very short, and then it calms you down with, it has a bit of serotonin activity to it, but not in your typical way. Really, it's been studied for hundreds of years, and there hasn't been one specific MOA for kavalactones. My suspicion is it is a symphony, and there's a word you're going to hear from the kratom scientists, but it is a symphony of the kavalactones working together. One kavalactone can inhibit the metabolism of another when taken in concert, whereas in isolation, that half-life of that kavalactone is very short. So there's a lot going on that's still not understood with kava and the brain, but truly kava has been around for thousands of years and not just consumed for medicinal purposes, but also consumed recreationally. It still is. It is the drink of Fiji. It's such a large thing once you leave the United States. Kratom, not so much. Kava, yes. Kava, you can say kava, and so you'll have 10 people asking you how much you need. It is a very common thing. It's in the grocery stores in Australia. It's in the grocery stores in New Zealand. It's in the grocery stores in Fiji. You could pick a bag up off the shelf. There's no one asks about, will this interact with my this or that, whatever. It's just a food. It's just a powder you mix with water, and that's a food. You drink it. So it's a completely different world between the two. And I'll let you direct a bit more, Charlie.
When did we first see Kratom and Kava linked together in the United States, and how has it evolved over time?
The first time to see Kava and Kratom linked together was at a Kava bar. And it's debated whether it was Kava Sutra or the Purple Lotus Kava bar in Florida. But the Purple Lotus Kava bar was the first Kava bar to be sued for inclusion of Kratom with Kava without notifying the customer. But I believe it was and it was in 2002 or 2003, which it started. The same people that were involved with the spice industry got shut down by the DEA. One of them had their factory blow up, but they got shut down by the FDA. They ratted out all these different fake weed manufacturers down there in Florida, and they needed something else. They wanted something else to supplement their lifestyle. And they went to the South Pacific to look for something. One of them found Kava, which was actually not terrible. And the other found Kratom, which brought us to where we are today. And I truly think that when they brought this plant to America, they did not expect for it to be here for more than like a year before it was banned. I think that they were just going to do a hot shot and get as much money as they could and run. And because that's the MO of these people that started this, they would sell things until they couldn't, then find another one to sell it till they couldn't, and find another one until sell it, on and on. And this is just one where they happen to be very successful with it. And now with things like the AKA and all the advocacy and the proponents and people that say Kratom is the best thing since sliced bread, that does nothing but make these people that sell this stuff just, oh man, they're just, they sleep great at night.
Many of our listeners have been affected by the Kava Kratom drinks, the tonics. I will say the name brand, the Free Feels, or I always get that wrong. The Feel Freeze. I'm going to leave that. That's not a typo.
Free Feels.
It's a blooper. I'll leave that blooper in there for
my friends will appreciate it.
When did those emerge? And what do you think about that? I know we had Scott Carney on a couple weeks ago and his investigation about botanic tonics. Why don't you talk about that product? And yeah,
certainly. I would love to talk about that product. I've been watching that specific manufacturer for the past, since they started 2019, 2020. I had someone say, hey, Jimmy, I think that there's another one of these shot manufacturers coming out and it might be a bad one. And I saw the advertisement, noticed it said nothing about Kratom, all about Kava. Everything's Kava, no Kratom. So I messaged on one of their Facebook pages and I said, you guys need to let people know what's in these drinks. I'm not going to ask you again, but you should let people know what's in these drinks. And I got a response that said their FDA agent said they did not have to list the portions of their product that were of such small quantity. And that's the answer I got. I was like, all right, so that's how it's going to be. So I started I own kavaforums.com. I've been running that since 2012. And I post a thread about, is Feel Free addictive? And I put a whole bunch of stuff about what was in Feel Free, what they were trying to do, and a link to the FDA adverse event report thing where people could report issues with it. So I started that, and I get a message from Jerry, hey, we need to talk. And I'm just like, no, I don't think so. I don't think we need to talk. There's nothing we need to talk about. If you were a real Kava drinker, you would have never made this product. What's in the product? We're being ingenuous. There's nothing we need to speak about here. And he messaged me for quite a long time trying to get me to talk to him. And eventually I did. I got on a Zoom with him. So I was like, all right, so if it's just me and him, I'll just see what he wants. I log into the Zoom and there's 3 people in there. So I'm like, oh, hello. And I immediately get about 4 or 5 of my friends in there too. Hey, let's even it up. So I sat there and talked to the man, and I guess the sun was in his eyes because he spoke with his eyes closed the whole time. Don't know, that could have been the feel free. But he talked to me once. He really wanted me on his team, really wanted me to be on his coalition. Feel free is an abomination to this country. That this is a product that is not helping people. It might be helping people get off of alcohol that want to get off of alcohol, but it is not just going out in the street and just getting these winos off of it. It's just, oh, holy shit, this is great. I'll never drink again. That's not how this is happening. People are trying these and getting addicted to them, realizing they're more addictive than alcohol. It's more addictive than alcohol. Like opioids are more addictive than alcohol. And I'll say that because there's faster. It's a faster addiction. It's a harder physical addiction. It takes months and months for almost years for alcohol to work up to the point where you have true DTs. But with opioids, you can do this in a matter. It depends on the person, but 3 or 4 days, 7 days, you're looking at having a bit of opioid withdrawal at the end of that.
Yeah.
And this is no different.
So I know people walk away from that experience, and you see this on Reddit. Should I blame the Kratom? Should I blame the Kava? And eventually I think everybody gets to the point that it's mostly the Kratom, and most people know that's not like the traditional form of Kava, and it's an extract, right? It's a Kava extract.
Correct. And there's I think he's changed the formulation so many times. I've saved over the years how many different labels they've had, and it's 4 or 5 different they've changed. But it was originally about 400 milligrams of Kava extract per bottle, and now it's down to about 250. But still, if you're drinking 10 bottles of this stuff at 2.5 grams of Kava lactones, I'm going to be honest, like that is big time Kava consumption level, and you'll probably get the skin. And if anybody's listening to this and they've drank lots of Feel Free and they've had the skin issue, I'm sorry, that part was the Kava. That was the Kava. The Kava causes a reversible, and it will go away, a reversible, what's called an ichthyosis type reaction on your skin, where it interferes with the layer that prevents water loss on your skin. So your skin loses a lot of water to the air. And also it interferes with the way that the pieces of your skin at the very top adhere. So you'll get these scales and it'll peel off and it'll look like an alligator. That sort of thing is the Kava. It's weird because I've been watching very closely because we don't see it very often. I run our Kava, and yeah, there's some people that go absolutely insane with Kava. They buy it from sketchy places and end up with some really bad skin effects.
Yeah.
But over, like above and beyond, like completely at large, it does not seem to happen to most people. Whereas with this product, this noxious Feel Free, we see people at this level. I've seen pictures where someone was in their truck and it looked like they had turned into dust and just fell into dust in their truck, and it was just a pile in their truck from where they had just scraped it all off of them. And it's just some of the stories that I hear about Feel Free are terrifying. I read an account of someone throwing it up in a cup and then drinking it again. That sort of behavior is like something that I would expect from someone with a needle in the other arm. And yeah, it's Feel Free is a noxious product, and I honestly have a lot of sympathy for the people that are addicted to it currently. You can get off. There are many avenues for help. There's people that want to help you. There's people that have gone through this that are trying to get off of Feel Free, that have gotten off of Feel Free, that have been successful. I've talked to Feel Free representatives that are mad that all of their friends are stuck on Feel Free, that even their people that work for them are not very happy about what's going on. If you check one fun thing, if you check their Glassdoor reviews, I think that's a funny one. So if you have any time, dude, that one is one that I've been following and keeping tabs on and watching morph into something just beyond. I didn't think it was going to be what it is.
I know you have a standard recommendation for new people who are quitting Kratom and they come across Kava and they think maybe Kava would be something to help with withdrawals. or that might be helpful to as a replacement for Kratom to wind down.
It's brought people together for thousands of years, but nowhere on that list had they had it for withdrawal with withdrawal issues. It's never medicinally, it's not, that was never on the list. In fact, anxiety is still not on the list. There's not that much data that would suggest that it is good for generalized anxiety disorder. Generalized, and I should make sure that I clarify there. Generalized anxiety disorder is in the DSM-5 for actual definition of that being multifaceted and not just being panicky or just that sort of thing. Let's go back to the Kava. For someone that is just quitting Kratom, I suggest no. I suggest that, because Kava and Kratom, and this bothers me. I wake up thinking about this, but Kava and Kratom have been so intertwined with each other and so ubiquitously sold together that I could not consciously tell someone that they should go out and try Kava with the thought, knowing that it likely will come from a Kratom dealer or a Kratom shop or a head shop that has Kratom right next to it. That doesn't help anyone. Does Kava have restoring effects? Could Kava help some things? Maybe. But it is much, much more important for you to stay as far away from anything Kratom related. And unfortunately, Kava is Kratom related now. I wish this were not the case. It sends a very bad signal to those people that have cherished Kava for the last 2,000 years in the South Pacific. It's a redefining of Kava when you mix it with Kratom. It's a cultural appropriation, to be quite honest with you. When something that has an extremely long history, a deep cultural usage, and you mix it with something that has maybe couple hundred years of use as a medicinal substance for laboring in the fields, these two things are not like each other. They come from different places. They come from different areas in the world. They don't mix together. It's not something that we've ever seen come together. The closest thing that Kava would come to in terms of being mixed together is betel nut. They may have existed together at the same time, chewing betel and Kava drinking were. But for someone that's coming off of Kratom or any drug, get right with yourself and then can make whatever considerations you want to. But my suggestion is at least 6 months to a year before you even consider it, if you consider it at all. Because I think even in 6 months to a year, the Kava is still going to be in the Kratom shop. What good have we done in that regards? I suggest staying away from it for your own good. Now, will it hurt you? Will Kava itself, if you went to Hawaii, say you went to Hawaii and you found a Kava bar that was an actual Kava bar, would that cause you to immediately go and search out Kratom? No, it wouldn't. It's not like that. But if you're in America, like the mainland America, I don't trust a Kava bar. I just don't. I should say this specifically because there are some actually good Kava bars that don't serve Kratom, but by far and large, there are 95 to 97% of them that serve Kratom, and happily.
Thank you for that. Could you talk a little bit about your own recovery journey and then how you incorporated Kava into it and how you use it responsibly today, despite your history of addiction?
Sure. I went into NA and I stayed in NA. I was clean for about 6 months until I started feeling better. But I started noticing that I had this specific static between my ears that I couldn't get rid of, and this aching desire for something at the end of the day. And I don't know if that's an animalistic thing. I don't know if it's an addict thing, but I just had to have that something at the end of the day. So about 6 months into my recovery, I tried Kava pills, and I used them like they said on the bottle for anxiety as a supplement. And that absolutely worked. I truly felt better. I felt like my anxiety had lifted slightly, and I was like, okay, this is great. And then one day I decided to take 3 of them at the same time, and I was like, this is better than great. So I that's when it was like, okay, so what is this? And I looked into it deeply, and found that my liver was going to die for sure. No, I'm just kidding. We'll get into that. But I looked into it during that time, and it seemed like a viable thing for me. It said non-addictive, and I read through. There were studies at the time that confirmed that it was non-addictive physically. I don't want to say you can get addicted to anything like water and sugar and everything, but there are people that are addicts that are to such a degree, it does not matter what the substance is. If it does anything, it will cause a problem for them. That's the way humans work. It's not about sugary things. It's about those people that don't have an off button for something like this. But Kava was something that I felt did not control me. I started drinking it. I started making it during home group meetings in front of my NA members. They were like asking me what it was, and I would tell them, and I'd be like, it's my anti-anxiety, and it's my sleep, it's my antidepressant sort of thing. So I put it out there as a medicinal thing, and it ate at my brain for many years because I was in NA for almost 10 years, and I drank Kava the entire time. So it took a long time for me to like truly wrap my mind around the fact that I'm drinking something, but like this whole program tells you this is this. If you, anything is a drug, anything that changes you, the way you feel is a drug, and it will lead you down the same path. But Kava did not. Kava did not lead me down that path. And it was a strange thing. It's where it made me question the whole rhetoric of you switching seats on the Titanic. You're still going down. It made me question that whole thing. Yes, that applies for drugs like heroin and meth and crack and these things that will absolutely take your life away and flush it down the toilet. But there are others that have different, I don't know. They're not the same. They're not drugs in the drug sense. Kava is not something that, first, let me preface something. My speaking tonight may sound familiar. It may sound familiar.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yep. It may sound very familiar, the way that my analogies and things that I talk about, because Kratom vendors and Kava vendors that also sell Kratom have ascribed these attributes that belong to Kava to Kratom to sell more Kratom. I cannot tell you how many websites I've seen that say that Kratom has thousands of years of ceremonial use. It has not. It does not. It ain't happening. It didn't happen. We don't have any evidence. Right? Couple hundred years of medicinal use. And that's totally different from thousands of years of cultural ceremonial. Like this is where Fiji, they crown kings this way. It ended fights between tribes in Vanuatu. It probably prevented a few people from being eaten, but it's a lot different. It's almost a cultural, it's okay, let me say it specifically. It is a cultural keystone species. And that is a difference between what's being sold in these shots is a bastardization. And I know there's people out there, it's his thing. He likes that more. But I can hook you up with like people that are watching this from the other side of the Pacific, just jaw dropped. Like what's being added to Kava. They see this as a slap to their face in just a very cultural way. And it's an appropriative way because we're taking their plant, extracting it from them, extracting the plant, and then taking the plant and mixing it with something else and changing its characteristics entirely. So it's a big deal to these people in the South Pacific. They feel like they're being disenfranchised. They feel like they're missing out. Like it isn't part of the Kava culture. And that's the problem. People want to be like, oh, Kratom's part of the Kava culture. No, go take your Kratom culture somewhere else. It is different. Last time I missed my Kava dose, you know what I did? Went to bed. You know what I did? Nothing. It didn't cause me to sweat. Didn't cause me to have to kick somebody's door down and go through their friggin' medicine cabinet. It didn't cause me to have to go and wait at the gas station to make sure that I get what I need when it opens. Yeah, it's totally different. But at the same time, I don't want people to think that this means you should run out and purchase every Kava thing on the earth. It is something you need to research to see how it was consumed, to understand, read people's reports about it. It tastes terrible. I can say it probably tastes a little worse than Kratom. So if you know that, yeah, it has a very unique latexy taste to it that is different. You go ahead.
There's many of our listeners are into the recovery program that it's just total abstinence. And I think Kava would be in the something to abstain from. And some of them might have already stopped listening by now and might be not pleased with this episode. And I don't blame them. And then I can hear the pro-Kratom people saying, this guy is just a hypocrite. Says all the things that he's advocating for Kava should be the same principles that we should be doing for Kratom. I do want to say out loud, all plants aren't the same. My interest in this is because they're so linked together in the marketplace in America. And I think it's obvious that Kratom is being sold, trying to trade on Kava's better safety record and its less controversial nature. I think it's very clear. And I do believe that they deserve to be put in different buckets.
Yeah.
And at least in the marketplace. And then in terms of recovery, I think that's a personal choice. I think some people could successfully harm reduce with Kava. They won't necessarily spiral out of control, but there are some people that it might initiate cravings for them, and they just should stay away from it. I would not recommend Kava for most people probably that are in recovery, but for some it might be something beneficial. I guess my interest is more on the policy implications. And one of the things you did, you mapped all the Kava bars in America. And as you said in the last episode in our Kratom in the headlines, one of the dynamics, it's a misnomer. It's not really Kava bars. They're actually really Kratom bars. They're botanical bars. They sell both. And the majority of what they're selling is Kratom. So tell
Right.
What about that mapping project that you did?
I went through and actually that it was started with the help of Ben from Karuna Kava. He always wants me to say that, but he turned it over to me after he got a couple in there. But I took a few days to go through Google and also ask online to see about Kava bars that were under construction. And then I went through all of their social media and searched for any instances of their consumers speaking about how they purchased any kind of Kratom beverage. So I went through and I starred them. Any Kava bars that do not sell Kratom have a gold star, where all the Kava bars that do have or do produce or do sell Kratom have a blue star or a blue indicator, I guess you could say. But I went through there and just for my own sake, just to keep up with how this is spreading across the country. And you can see it's making its way. It's just marching across. It's marching from Florida, going west. And of course, we had a few Kava bars. In fact, and there's people that will argue with me about this, but there could have been the first Kava bar on the West Coast and not the East Coast. And I'll leave it on that. I'll leave it at that. And I'm sure someone will be mad that I said that. But there is a possibility that the Kava bar started prior to any in Florida. And it was in Eugene, Oregon. There was this first, Kava bars were first this altruistic, community-based, recovery-centered idea where people could come and get away from their addictions and find camaraderie. And a lot of these bars, I don't want to say a lot, I have heard reports of specific bars hosting NA and AA meetings within the bar itself. There is this logic being coalesced that is just so wild looking from an outside perspective, because you see something that is that you go to Quitting Kratom or you go to Quitting Feel Free and you see these people's accounts of just endless agony of trying to quit. But then you see the flip side of their just whole, just natural, it's just going to help you. There's nothing that's going to cause you any problem with this. And it's just, there is such a wide gap that it bothers me how wide it is, how far we are from one side of this, from someone saying, oh, you know what helped me quit alcohol, to, hey, this has ruined my life. I don't have a marriage anymore. My bank account's in the negatives. Like, what is that? Like, why do we have such that? And like any researcher that is ignoring that right now, any researcher that is saying, oh, how good it is and look what it does for the addict, I think is absolutely in the pocket of people that want to continue to sell the shit. and not actually interested in the suffering, in the human pain, in like the problems that it's causing for people that have never touched fentanyl, that have never had any issue with fentanyl, but all of a sudden they have an issue with kratom.
There is some more and more incidents of kratom being people's first addiction. It's not unusual. How many, just real quickly, how many of the bars are Kava only? Roughly estimate.
Maybe 15 out of 400. Yeah. Maybe.
That's a small percentage. If you're using kratom and you're consider yourself in recovery, and people call that Florida sober, I guess if you're using Kava and you're in recovery, we'll call that Hawaii sober.
There you go.
One thing I've observed about Kava, there isn't a quitting Kava subreddit. People are not going on medicated assistant treatment for Kava. I have not heard of any claims of deaths associated with Kava. And I know there's one or two severe cases I think I've heard of people going to even an inpatient treatment for Kava. I heard somebody suing a Kava bar once. This couple actually.
Yeah, it's because of kratom.
I thought the lawsuit, they were blaming the Kava, but it was actually, when they dug down, it was the kratom.
It was the kratom.
That's what that lawsuit was about. It wasn't actually the Kava.
It was not the Kava. It was the Komodo drink that had Kava and kratom mixed together without them actually listing the kratom.
Of course. So again,
yeah. Wild.
I think there is a difference with the distinction between these. Not to what is this? Yeah, not to what about, and just because the justifications I do admit are similar for both of them, but there is a difference. And personally, when I've consumed Kava, I found it habit forming, and I found I could get out of hand with it. But as soon as I decided that I didn't want to drink it anymore, it was easy to quit. There was no hangovers, and I've decided, unless I go somewhere and somebody like serves some Kava to me, I'm not going to seek it out or have it in my home. Partly because I don't like the taste of it. I could never acquire the taste of it. But it is habit forming. I do have, being an addict, I have an impulse to take more. And if I have it in the house, I'll drink it more often. Whereas if there's a coffee shop down the street serving it, that there's a natural way of titrating it.
I would say that I've been drinking Kava for 20 years daily, every single day, minus a few where like I had to go to the hospital for my liver. No, I'm just kidding. I had to go to the hospital for COVID and like I stopped, but there was no, other than the COVID being awful, there was nothing that I could pinpoint being withdrawal or any issues. And Fijians will drink for generations. They'll drink for 10 years and stop, and it's not a problem. It's really, and here, like anyone listening is like, yeah, this is what they told me when I started drinking kratom. But truly, these accolades do not belong to kratom. They were taken from Kava to sell kratom. Kava has been the biggest whipping boy, the biggest front runner for all of these herbs and everything. Hell, even Neptune's Fix had a Piper Methysticum version of their tianeptine product. Everyone seems to think that they have to bastardize Kava in some way. It's like it gives credibility to whatever they're selling. And it's not right. It's wrong, but it's not necessarily that it's not wrong, not right in the context that you need to run out and go buy 50 Kava pills and take them all at once. It's not right. And this is something that was brought over to America. And this is something that missionaries have fought over. Missionaries have tried to suppress the use of Kava. Kava was seen as a rebellious item that put the middle finger up to all religions. Kava has been this wild beverage that only the heathens drink. And still in Vanuatu, I've spoken with some of the chiefs. I had somebody translate for me. And I said, I want to say thank you, because I feel like that Kava is what kept me from doing bad drugs. And they couldn't understand that, because Kava to them is like an intoxicant recreational thing. They drink it to get wild, to get loopy. That's where it comes from. Kava, it has that element of recreation to it, where people in recovery may not necessarily need that in their lives. It can lead back to certain, not necessarily It may not first lead back to whatever drug you were doing, but it can lead you back to behaviors in which you would stay, that you would be more likely to pick up those drugs in the past that you may have done. And I know that's slippery slope fallacy, and that is a fallacy. I'm only the research project of one person, so I don't take what I say as gold. Take it and research and do your own research on Google Scholar about both Kava and Kratom. Disregard a lot of the liver stuff, because that has been debunked a long time ago and turned over in courts and all sorts of stuff.
Jimmy, why don't you tell us a little bit about the KCPAs that are being passed at the state level? And I see them as more ban prevention bills than true
Yes.
consumer protection. But what are some of the deficits in the KCPAs?
Let's see here. I'm pulling up my notes here. Okay, KCPA laws and deficits. Okay, let's see what we've got going on here. KCPA is the Kratom Consumer Protection Act. This is an act that's being pushed actively by the American Kratom Association in states that have either no or lax kratom laws. They do set age limits, and this age limit is pretty much their red herring saying that, hey, we're fixing everything. Look, only 21 and up can buy it, which in reality, that does not stop the father from getting addicted to this stuff and ruining his life and his kids' lives and his wife and everything else. But they leave holes in this KCPA that you could drive a dump truck full of metabolites through. One thing that I've never heard once spoken about or given any sort of leeway whatsoever is mitragynine pseudoindoxyl, or you'll hear it spoken about on the internet as mit-pseudo. This is a further metabolite of 7-hydroxymitragynine that can be produced artificially and can be added to products with absolutely no way to tell. There are no tests. It has an affinity for opioid receptors in the range of fentanyl, and has an efficacy of about 80%. That means it's a full agonist. I'd be scared to death of this. Yeah, it allows an entirely new gear to be shifted in this whole deal. It basically allows for open access to anything. And if you look at the best one to look at is Florida's, because Florida is, you have to be 21. And I think that's about it. So it's really, they're just there to pacify politicians and to allow people's access to these products, and to allow the sale of extract products. Because in Tennessee, we do not allow extract products. They came in and wanted this KCPA, and it would have opened the door to all the extract products being sold in Tennessee. So that's what they want to do. We already have a 21 and up law. And they still wanted to come in and change everything. So it's not there. These KCPAs aren't worth the paper they're written on. I think that a couple of people realizing what's going on could undo all this in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, at the very least, and none of the bills do this, they should not allow the companies to sell through a shell company. There should be open transparency and not stacks of shells on shells.
They know it's wrong. They set it up because they know it's wrong. So it's, yeah, who's coming to get you, man? Who's coming to get you?
What do you see as a pathway for sensible regulation going forward?
Sensible regulation going forward. That is a good question. I think that can be a trick question. Yes. Because we would have to have established avenues where we could actually regulate something like this. What we have are advocacy organizations demanding that this product is not an opioid product. We have science saying this is an opioid product. We have, this is a drug. Where does the drug fit in the open public? And it does not. Within our framework, it does not. Without a new framework to take care of this subject and not just tacking it on to ATF, it would need a new entire framework to work. It's not, you would have to go back through, you would have to go back to the pharmacy, you would have to go and make sure, it would require extensive clinical tests on interactions with other medications, so we could make sure that whenever someone is prescribed purified mitragynine, that it's not going to interact with the drugs that they're on. It's got a long way to go. And right now, there is no avenue I see for regulation. It's just going to sit there and just waddle in the gray area until it's either banned or the FDA makes a purified drug form of mitragynine that brings an actual drug to the table that can be prescribed, and then it will be taken off the shelves. But until then, there really isn't an answer, at least not from my perspective. And I don't know all the answers, and I'll fully admit that. But from my perspective and what I've seen, I don't see a way forward with the tools that we have as a nation with this. Yeah, cannabis is different. You're talking about a product that is very strong, that is addictive, quote unquote, but not physically addictive to the point where you do it for 6 weeks and you're going to have debilitating withdrawals and throwing up and shit. Like that kind of stuff. We're talking about a different class of substance, and that needs to be considered when these laws are being enacted. And also, it has some danger issues to it. We've seen that there are deaths attributable to Kratom alone. To Kratom alone. Charlie and I have seen toxicology reports of Kratom alone deaths. And they did not have anything else in their system. They were not old. They did not have pre-existing conditions. They didn't take any sort of over-the-counter medications at the time. We have to get to the point where we can admit that this is causing actual problems for a small number of people. But if this were a drug on the market and it killed 5 or 10 people, oh my God, there'd be a review. This would be taken off the market. There'd be all sorts of issues where it pulled. You'd see it on the news. But yet here we are trying to explain away deaths. Proponents trying to say, oh, it was a nitazene. They can't test for nitazines. Or they didn't use the correct tandem testing methodology. There's always a goalpost that moves with this. But the truth is, we wouldn't be seeing this many issues. We see on certain groups that are dedicated to those that have loved ones that have been lost through confirmed mitragynine toxicity. It grows by the week. You see a new person every week talk about how their son or daughter, husband, boyfriend, girlfriend passed or had a seizure in their car, and the only thing they found in their system was mitragynine. So we can't continue to put our heads in the sand and say there's nothing wrong. This is a natural product. This is going to help everyone. We're going to solve the opioid epidemic. It isn't happening. It's not going to happen. We've got way too much at stake here, and to go back on centuries of trying to get this stuff set up to where this didn't happen with the Pure Food and Drug Act, the FDA, all the things involved. We're regressing when we say that we need to take Kratom and protect it from the FDA. While it's killing people, while it has deaths on the record, while people have psychosis on the record, while people are going to treatment on a mass basis on the record. That's not right. That seems like it's controlled by someone that has ulterior motives that wants to just sell Kratom. But that's just my opinion.
There's a big fan base for Kratom, and they've been convinced through their talking to each other. So I think there's some groupthink, and through, I'll call it propaganda from the industry that says even our conversation right now is misinformation, that we are drug hysteric prohibitionists. Yeah, that we've been brainwashed by the DEA and the FBI. And there's real life issues here from women who are pregnant that are dependent on Kratom, the risks that their children face. I think the drug interaction is a major issue, that it's just lottery. You just got and then I think there's variability from human to human. And if you're a lucky one, the way your brain and body processes Kratom, there's no risk for you, and you can process it. But there's other people, maybe it's their genetics or some other kind of makeup, they don't process it as quickly.
I can
And
speak to that a little bit. The human body has this system called the CYP system, CYP 450, which is what allows the chemicals in our body, endogenous or ones that come from the exterior, to be metabolized, broken down, and excreted. So it allows something that's more polar to be broken down to where it can be excreted through water and through kidneys and urine. And what happens is some people have different expressions of these certain enzymes that break down these drugs, where and it's specifically where I'm going to speak about here is CYP3A4. CYP3A4 is a very important location where many pharmaceutical drugs are broken down and quite a number of pharmacokinetic interactions occur. And with this one, we're going to talk about where kratom hits CYP3A4. CYP3A4 is a CYP enzyme site that has a variable inter-individual variability. So what that means is one person can have far greater activity than another. So we have this wide range of effects from kratom because when kratom hits that CYP3A4, if you are a slow metabolizer, it sits in your body. It sits in your body and its half-life is longer. It stays with you longer, has more of a stimulatory effect, less of an opioid effect. If you are a rapid or fast, ultra rapid metabolizer at CYP3A4, it may feel like more of a opioid. It might feel more of a morphine or like a painkiller because your body is faster at converting it into that 7-hydroxy form. But one thing's the way that I think that kratom can cause harm is that some people with reduced function in that CYP3A4 enzyme can cause themselves and on top of the metragenine to compound the amount of metragenine in their system. And this is where people say, oh, there's no way, they must have taken tons of kratom to get that level in their blood. Not so fast. They could have had an issue where not only do they have a low activity of CYP3A4, if they're taking lots of kratom to begin with, that also inhibits CYP3A4, which in turn inhibits metragenine even further. So you've got this sort of cycle going on where you're inhibiting more and you're causing a higher serum metabolization or a higher level of metragenine in serum to the point where you get people with 2,000 nanograms per milliliter in their system, 1,700, where normally you'd get like something like 85 if you're like a normal consumer. So it's not that they took 40 bottles of kratom pills or smoked or dabbed 15 grams of kratom extract in their dab rig. It's that they have issues where they don't know it until it's too late, or it causes some sort of cardiotoxicity due to the buildup, where it's just one pill too much and they either have a seizure and die or have some sort of cardiac event and pass away. And that's where we want to say we want to split this from respiratory depression. Like respiratory depression, there isn't that much respiratory depression going on with this, but that does not absolve it from it being dangerous, from having the possibility of causing these other issues on other systems that are clear and free of what we normally think of with opioids.
Yeah, Dr. Cornell Santu, who was a guest a couple of weeks ago, he's saying that often they're looking like stimulant deaths.
Stimulant deaths would be from the seizure and the adrenergic stimulation. Some people can be far more sensitive to the stimulation of these adrenergic agonists. And when you put either Adderall, caffeine, meth, anything on top of that, you can be asking for a seizure like by large. Kratom has way too many interactions with like normal stuff for us to say it's the kratom that's safe, not the other things. It's just
and it's not that we're kratom haters. We're trying to be realistic.
Yeah.
But the fallacy of thinking is thinking that kratom is always innocent. If there's anything else present, even nicotine or caffeine, it was those other substances that caused, and sometimes it might be half and half. Well, or even 25% kratom and 75% something else. So we should be caring about those interactions too.
I think that if we consider the source, it's not all that big of a deal. It's the people that don't understand pharmacology that are trying to make these assertions. And
Yes.
when they do, all they do is tell everyone out there, I don't know anything about pharmacology. And like the people that actually make the decisions, they see this and they say, oh, that's obviously someone that doesn't know what they're talking about. And it gets overlooked. It's yelling into the void. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Switch gears a little bit, and because that was some heavy stuff. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your travels that Kava has taken you?
I've been to Hawaii, the big island of Hawaii on the eastern coast, Hamakua and Hilo area, where a lot of kava in Hawaii is grown. It's like a perfect hill slope. Kava needs a good bit of drainage for its roots can't sit in water. They have to be wet continually, but they cannot sit in water. So you have to build them up either on mounds or you have to put them on hillsides. Hawaii is perfect on that coast for growing kava. And I went and met with a gentleman named Ed Johnston, which is basically the godfather of American Hawaiian kava. He went out, him and a few other people went out into the bush and found where old time Hawaiians had propagated kava and it was still growing there. And that's one thing I need to touch on is that kava is not a seed or any sort of there's no seeds to kava. It doesn't produce seeds. Kava is a propagated only plant. So every clone of kava was meticulously selected and cared after and planted and weeded and made sure that it was grown. Each plant, like the one behind me, is quite a big and I'm for because this is a podcast, I'm sitting with my background picture of some plants that are actually at Ed Johnson's farm, or not his farm, but his house. But these stalks were about 3 to 4 inches around on this plant. They get massive if you let them. But the thing about it is it takes about 2 to 4 years to grow one plant and harvest. And that one plant might produce maybe 10 kilos of product. So we're not talking about a large income versus work. This is a very difficult industry. There's a lot of time involved, a lot of backbreaking labor involved. And whereas I don't want to downplay anyone else's work, but it's a leaf on a tree. There's a difference there. There's quite a difference. And I've even seen, to go off on a tangent, I've seen websites say that kratom comes from the leaf of the kava plant and kava comes from the root of the kava plant. So that is how intertwined and intermingled these two plants are that have absolutely nothing to do with each other. Nothing to do with each other. Only thing kava and kratom being combined at all is an American invention, period. It never happened in the islands. It never happened culturally. It never happened except for in Florida. That is where it started. Kava has had a vibrant history for 2,000 years. There weren't treatment centers seeing people for kava, even though we've been drinking kava for 20 years in the United States pretty heavily. It's something where this new sort of kava shot mixed with kratom is giving the ire to kava. People thinking it's kava because the product is being called kava, when in reality this is similar to people taking, say, Vicodin, trying to get after the hydrocodone and saying the acetaminophen harmed me. Yeah, you were trying to get through that to get to the other stuff, and that's kava's just there for them to get through to get to the kratom. And it would do the whole world a great service if they just stop that. It isn't the kava making these shots all fun. It's the extra metabolites they're adding to them. So they could take kava out and still make money. You know what? I wish that we didn't even have to make this podcast, and I wish that there were no reason for me to have any knowledge whatsoever about kratom. I wish that weren't even a thing. I love kava, and I had nothing to do with kratom until 10 years, 15 years after I started drinking kava. So it come into a different spot in my life. And for me, it's a positive thing, but not everyone would experience that. And I've seen people where they're like, hey, this reminds me too much of alcohol. I can't do it. And you know what? Hey, don't. It's not. This is something like I tell people all the time. Kava is for people with a Kava-sized hole in their life. And if you don't have that, it doesn't even it doesn't even feel like it's for you. It doesn't even feel good. It can make your skin feel hot. It can do all sorts. It make you feel cold. It can do stuff that like people don't associate with pleasant feelings, but it's a rough thing. Like it's always been that way. Like even in Vanuatu, they drink it and they spit and they like scream and stuff. Like it's always been that. And the problem has been where we try to make it a medicinal product and say, hey, this is great for anxiety and you can take this instead of your benzodiazepines. That's not true. That's not true. Kava doesn't work on benzodiazepine receptors. It doesn't have any affinity for benzodiazepine receptors. And I want to say this before anything. In the presence of, and I want to explain this, there's a drug called flumazenil, which is what they give for people if they're having a benzo overdose, similar to Narcan. If you were having an opioid overdose, they give you flumazenil for a benzodiazepine overdose. They did research to see if cavalactone still exerted their effects in the presence of flumazenil, and they do, which means that cavalactones have no affinity or activity at the benzodiazepine receptor. So wanted to clear that up. Kava is not a benzo. It doesn't work like a benzo. It's not GABAergic. You're not going to seize up after you drank it for 2 days. Yeah. But also at the same time, I want to be very clear that we are not promoting this. This is not something that I want you to run out and buy. I'm not going to tell you what Kava vendor to go to. Don't even message me about it. I think you're just going to have to figure that out yourself if you really want it. But truly give yourself time to heal. Give yourself time to heal, because time is the absolute number one thing that's going to make you feel better. Your brain has lots of processes that it has to rebalance after all of this, and let it do that. Get yourself down to who you are, get yourself straight, get your life straight, and then think about other things. Where'd you go, Charlie? We lost Charlie. There he is. But
some of my talking was lost probably, but it recorded on your end, so we didn't lose any of you.
Okay.
But while we wrap up, I know you've been hanging out in Kratom quitting circles for a long time, and you give out advice. What do you think is the number one, since that's what our core of our podcast is about, is helping people quit Kratom? What would be your number one recommendation?
Number one recommendation is connection. Get on these things, get on these Facebook groups, get on these chats, be as honest as you can about where you're at. Talk to one of your family members, tell them where you're at, and things will get better. It doesn't feel like it. The disease tells you not to tell anyone because you're going to get in trouble or things will change. Don't listen to that. Tell as many people as you can. If you want to get this thing taken care of, if you want to get a leg up on that, other people want to help you. Like they want to be like, they want to gas you up as much as possible, tell you can do it. Look at this junkie over here. He did it. I did it. We can all do it. And that's part of it. It's a throwback to my days in NA, because there's a lot of people that hurt, and there are answers to those hurts, but it takes time to get there. And my suggestion is just to keep coming back to do this. Don't pick up. Don't go to that gas station. Don't go to any places that sell this crap. I don't care if it's a Kava bar. Stay away from them. I don't care how altruistic they sound or what the community looks like. But yeah, just give yourself time to recover and feel better before you do anything, and don't go back. And one thing that was told to me over and over is misery is fully refundable. So you can, and remember that you can always go back and get more misery, but you don't have to. Today, you don't have to do that. I felt like I've in the past had to, no choice, had to do it. Don't feel that way. You have a choice today. Once you're off of that shit, you have a choice, and you can make that choice every day, and it's only one day at a time, and we're all on the same day.
That's a great way to end things. Thanks a lot, Jimmy.
All right. Have a good night.